Welcome everybody back to I believe this is the 8th episode of Cyprus Asking People Things. And as last episode with Ainsley Melham, we've had surprise guests. We have another surprise guest today, and that is Josh. Sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
Josh Giuliano is my last name.
And we have Josh...
Name of a thoroughbred, I'm told.
Josh Giuliano on today. And we are going to be talking about all things audio engineering, but mostly audio engineering in the theatre, because Josh is a remarkable audio engineer who works at the Hayes Theatre and has to deal with the range of things that come with having to, be the audio engineer, the only audio engineer in a theatre, especially at the time of COVID when we're having to make a lot of solves. Anyway, I'm going to stop yabbering. And if you just want to introduce yourself a little bit, Josh, and yeah.
Certainly. Hi. Thanks for having me, Cyprus. This is really cool, man. My name is Josh Giuliano. I turned 30 this year, and I have been, if you don't count the the first job I had, which was sorting fish fingers into boxes, I've been an audio engineer all my life. I started life in a small country town. You might have heard of it from a previous episode, but I came from Bathurst.
You came from Bathurst as well?
Yes, believe it or not. Yep. This is, I don't know, I guess this is kind of like how small this world is getting, or is for Australians particularly. But Ainsley and I went to high school together.
That's right, yeah.
And we're both class of 09, and we both went to the same school. And he became a world famous actor, and I became an audio engineer out of it. I started at my high school. I originally was performing. I sung and I danced, and I was in all the choirs and all these fun things.
So that's why you have a magnificent voice when we've been doing the warm-ups.
Yeah, exactly. I can't let Ainsley have all the fun. There's got to be some backup singing going on there. But yeah, no, I noticed when I was performing that, I had a real penchant, if you like, for a lot of technology and things like that. And I felt like I was already searching for ways that I might be able to meld the creative side of things to the technical side of things. And an opportunity presented itself. And I remember this vividly, where we were gearing up for a musical. And my music teacher at the time, Mr. Hughes, he was insistent that everybody audition for things. Mm-hmm. And instead of auditioning, I actually turned it down and asked instead that I could be a part of the technical team for it. And that would have been the dipping my toes in. I got an opportunity to work alongside the technician that was hired in for the show, and got to be a part of the backstage crew. And I never left. I stayed in that and have been doing it ever since. I graduated high school and I went into a job at the Bathurst Memorial Entertainment Centre, which is this little 1,100 seat theatre in Bathurst. And, it plays host to like a whole wide range of things, everything from musical theatre to live bands and performances. They do, what else do they do? They have lots of like expos and like wedding expos and things like this. They do school events like formals and things, just a huge myriad of things. And they were looking for technicians, and I threw my hat in as a casual there, and knocked me down. I ended up getting a job there. So I worked there for 5 or so years. And in that time, I was studying in Sydney at the same time. I went to JMC Academy and did the Diploma of Audio Engineering there.
Really? So did you do that online or?
No, I drove it.
Wow.
I made sure to condense my classes down to 2 days a week. And I would get in the car at 5 in the morning. I would drive about an hour to Mount Victoria, and it's just like a little village in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
And then I would get on the train there, and it was another 2 hours to Sydney. Then walk to JMC Academy, do my classes for the day, and then get at the end of the day, jump on the train and go back home again. And then I would work, and then I would, gear up and go again. So
Wow.
did that
Dedication.
for a while. Yeah, look, I honestly don't recommend doing that. I got incredibly tired.
Oh, but you know what? I feel like all of us who have gone into the field we love have done something similar. I lived on the Central Coast, which I know you're a little bit familiar with.
Yeah.
I lived on the Central Coast my whole life and went to AIM University for 4 years. And the same thing, it ended up being about a 2-hour trip, because I would drive half an hour or so to the train station from Shelley Beach. It's, and that's in good traffic. And then catch the train an hour and 40 minutes into AIM, and then, walk the 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is to get to AIM, all with 20 kilos of cymbals on the back, or 10 kilos of cymbals. Because we always have to take that in.
Yeah. Look, I'm so glad that I wasn't the only one that did that. I mean, to be fair, my trip was sans the cymbals. Did not have those. but no, I get it, and I'm happy. I've got somebody else who's as dedicated to the course as I am.
Oh yeah.
I could only manage 8 months of that, though. I'll be honest. I decided that. I decided that I think after 8 months I was just a little bit too tired and needed to put that energy somewhere else instead of behind the wheel of a car.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm assuming it might have been the same. Those train trips, I got so much learning done.
Yeah, they were really good, and I had the benefit of the Western Line in Sydney, which I feel is probably one of the better ones that they've got. Because for that first hour and a half or so, you're just meandering through the mountains, and it's this beautiful, quiet carriage that you can just sit and get work done. Yeah, I absolutely smashed my assignments through doing that.
Yeah,
and it was really cathartic. It was really peaceful, and yeah, I look. Truth be told, I look back on that and I really enjoyed it. It was a wild experience. It was a very left turn for me, very much a left turn, and I'm glad I did it. I was really happy with that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on the Central Coast line at peak hour, we were packed in like sardines. I tell you what, I remember doing theory on the little nook in the front of the carriage. Probably like 20 people in there on a hot summer day.
Oh my God. Yeah, wow.
But
all right, well, look, I feel like you've probably trumped me on that one.
You know what? Again, that's what we do, and that's what we have done.
Yep.
And we did that.
It is. Yep.
And
it is. I came out of that. I got my diploma, got my big sheet of paper, and I took that, actually. I decided that was the time to gear up and go somewhere else. So I started job hunting and had no real plans, nowhere to be, no real destination in mind. I just sort of cast my net across Australia, and I was like, I'm going to work here, and see where the world takes me, see where the wind blows me. And so I ended up getting a job in Rockhampton, which is up in central Queensland.
Oh wow!
And
how long was that for?
I did that for 4 and a bit years. I started in 2016, about midway through 2016. So yeah, and then working as a full-time sound engineer up there. Again, they've got this beautiful, beautiful theatre called the Pilby, and they do this big, vibrant musical theatre scene up there, and that's where. Whereas before I was an engineer that was doing mainly live performances, like rock bands and things. Rockhampton is where I really honed my craft to become a musical theatre engineer, mixing musical theatre for pro-am, for community theatre, for high schools. Anybody who was in to do a musical, I was the guy. Um, and then only in February of this year, I was accepted as the technical operator for the Hayes Theatre in Sydney. And so once again, in much the same way, I didn't really have a direction or a location that I wanted to go, but Sydney was where it drew me, and I ultimately ended up working there. And I've now got three musicals under my belt.
Well,
having done
technically, I guess Merrily is, you could say, 2. We've done 2 seasons of that.
Could nearly well be, couldn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not a new musical, but, at least 2.
No.
3.2.
Musical it's the perpetual musical. I feel like maybe this is what would happen if you ended up in purgatory, where you'd just be like doing the same musical over and over again, and it just keeps getting delayed for various reasons, and you keep getting it rebooted.
Maybe we all are in purgatory.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe this is what this whole COVID thing's been.
Just reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes to hell and he's made to eat donuts, but he eats them all.
Yes. Yes, and he upsets the devil by actually eating them all.
So you've gotten into the Hayes. What was it actually like getting into one of Sydney's seminal musical theatre spaces?
Oh, goodness me. It was quite an honor, if I'm honest. I can only imagine, because I'm a country boy and have mainly worked regionally, right? So I can only imagine the kind of competition and the kind of the amount of people who wanted to work at a place like that, you know. And I don't know who else would have applied for that job, but when I got it, I felt like it was a real honor, and I was so very grateful to so many people for giving me that chance. I for a little while didn't think that I had those kinds of credentials. So to get recognized for something like that is it's such an honor, and I'm really, really grateful to the full team there, and I look forward to sort of giving them a lot of what I can give as an engineer, as a theatre technician, as much as I can, because it really feels like I was thrown a really awesome chance to work at, a very, even as I'm still learning today, a very well-known and a very beloved venue. It's not the biggest in Sydney by a long shot, but goodness me, does it turn out some incredibly high quality theatre. Yes, it's sensational, and I wear that as a badge of pride. I'm very pleased that I was recognised for that. I look forward to continuing this for a little while. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've done a brilliant job, and that's just not because I've got you on this podcast, but you've actually done an incredible job. Which actually brings me on to this other point that I really want to talk about is. When we're working in theatre, as I've talked about before with the other people who have been on, you have to be a problem solver. And when we're solving problems in theatre, because as stated, it's a 3-week turnaround and we have to put in a lot of hours outside of the theatre to obviously learn the show, know what it's about, get our own head around it. How did you go by actually shifting your mind to theatre focus in mixing, that is? Because as you know and I know, but maybe not all of us know, audio engineering in a mixing sense is very different from audio engineering a live band, which is very different from audio engineering a theatre show, which is very different from then audio engineering and mastering. So how have you actually shifted your focus and your mind to these different areas? Because the Hayes does a lot of band stuff as well, cabaret stuff. How do you shift that, and how did you actually learn the differences?
Yeah. I learnt the differences, you could say, in a trial by fire. I think when I started my job in Rockhampton, I knew what mixing was. I had done a lot of bands and I had assisted with a lot of musical theatre shows, but hadn't had a primary role in it as the sound engineer. So when I got to Rocky and started doing musicals up there, and realizing that they wanted a lot in such a short amount of time, I had to very quickly readjust and rethink what the important things are, what the core tenets of mixing for a specific style or genre, however you want to describe it. I had to really kind of learn quickly how to do it. And in doing so, it's kind of been the thing that has made me more adaptable, right? Like by sort of getting in and feeling that urgency and really needing to get these shows out, because especially in when you're working somewhere like Rockhampton, you don't actually have the luxury of even 3 weeks. You have maybe half a week to learn a show,
Wow.
program it, and get it up and ready for a thing, because it's not professional theatre. It's musicals for high schools. It's musicals for the local community, and so they don't have nearly the sorts of production budgets, time frames that you might think even a professional place, even with a professional place with a tight time frame, might have. So I had to learn very quickly, like how to put together a show exceedingly fast and deliver it reliably. I don't know exactly what it is, but I do feel like there's certain concessions that you have to make when you move from one mixing style to another. And I feel like that's probably the biggest difference. What do you concede when you move from one mixing style to another?
Yeah.
So if you start with a band and you're mixing for a cabaret show and something like that, and you've only got maybe one rehearsal, or maybe you don't even have a rehearsal at all. Maybe the show is the rehearsal
Yes,
for you.
yes.
Like you've never seen it before. You don't know what's coming on. What it could be anything. And so that's a live engineer's kind of gig, right? And that's where I cut my teeth. And I learnt to thrive in that environment, being like, okay, we've got to throw stuff out, speakers and microphones and all this sort of stuff. And I'm going to develop a mixing style that works for me, that allows me to work really, really quickly and get a sound that's really that sounds good, I hope. Just straight off the bat, right? That very little needs to be done, hopefully, to get a malleable sound out of it.
Yeah.
And then as the show starts and as you build through the show, it begins to evolve and morph as you mix the show, and you start to settle into the style, and you learn how everything's going, and you pick out the problems as you're listening to them. And maybe after the first song or so, you've actually started to really lock it in. So you learn as a sound engineer for live is you learn to get 90% of the way there before you've even seen the band, and then finish off with the last 10%. Now then you translate that to to musical theatre. You've got a little bit more time, so you can flesh out some other things, and you can maybe increase the complexity of what you're doing. But what you then lose, so then you then have to consider is that you don't just have 4 people and maybe 5 or 6 instruments to deal with. You've suddenly got anywhere upwards of, like if you look at Rocky, we had 28 radio mics and a full band, right?
Wow.
And so
yeah.
so it's busy, right? Like there's a lot to do. And so you've got more time up your sleeve because you'll have rehearsals. Sometimes if it's a good week, you'll have a full week of rehearsals. And so you'll be able to kind of finesse things a little bit more. You've got opportunities to be like, well, that didn't sound particularly good, so I can go back and I can have a look at that again. And um, but in saying that, you still have all these extra bits to look at as well. You have to learn a script. You have to learn who's running on and off stage, who's coming, who's live, who needs their microphones turned on, and who's about to disappear. So they need their microphones turned off so you don't hear them, running backstage and go, oh fuck, I fucked that up, and then that bit blasting through the PA system.
Yes, exactly. You hit on a really important point there, where you have at times seconds, milliseconds to mute somebody's mic.
Yep.
Because, being in the pit, listening, because we can still hear their mics when they're unmuted. Mm-hmm. They go backstage and they might say some of the silliest things, or just, sneeze or blow their nose or something. Yeah. And I think it's incredibly funny because, it rarely happens when, working in professional theater. It doesn't happen too often. Yeah. So when it does happen, it's funny. But when it does happen a lot, it does give a sense of unprofessionalism. So for you to be able to learn that script, know when everybody's coming on and off, being fully aware of that, programming that in if you have to or whatnot, it's just such a different element that even a year ago I did not know about. And the level of learning that has to be committed, in your schedule, to not only mix the band right, but to learn the show to get people in and out. It's just amazing.
It is, yeah, and that's the bit that you then gather, or that's the added complexity that comes with musical theatre, right? That isn't around in live. So if you look at live bands and stuff like that, the complexity is getting something usable in 15 minutes, and that's all the time you've got. In a musical, you've got more time, but you also have 3 hours of a show that you have to learn and get rehearsed to the point where you can't hear people's mics being turned on and off. They just sort of walk on stage, and it becomes this natural thing that when they start talking, you can hear them, right? But you can't hear them backstage. And then that's a big thing. It's quite very much different from one to the other.
Yeah.
And as you said a while back, this is not the recording world either. So we don't have a controlled environment to work in either. We don't have a studio to record in. We don't have any of these sorts of things. You have to make this work and be reticent to a live environment where there's noise and there's interference and there is random things that could happen on stage at any point that kind of get in the way of this, right? It's there's a lot to it, and it was me learning in a trial by fire situation. I thought I knew what I knew when I went into Rocky, and that was the best part was getting there and having this sort of almost a heart-stopping moment, being like, oh my God, can I actually do this, or am I screwed? Like, like those initial shows that I was doing, I would say were pretty rough, but I am grateful to Rocky for being the place that I really sort of learnt my craft, and got really good at building and developing a show in a short amount of time. And I'd say too that given the, like, it's funny, you come to the Haze and everyone's like, oh, you've only got 3 weeks of rehearsal to set things up. And I'm sort of going, 3 weeks? I wish I had 3 weeks in some cases, like the stuff that it would have turned out would have been like monumental in comparison. You know what I mean? Like it's,
yeah.
So yeah, like it's a learning curve, and sadly it's not something that you would ever learn studying. You kind of have to do it. You kind of have to find these places that will give you the chance and give you an opportunity for you to really hone that craft, really learn that sort of thing. Unfortunately, and I fully understand how lucky I am in the sense that I have been given that opportunity. And I think there's unfortunately a lot of chances, a lot of times where people have missed that opportunity and they're really starting on the back foot learning this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah, it's very much the same in the music world, in a sense of I feel very lucky, privileged to have been able to have studied, but then also played and performed and honed my own craft and been surrounded by incredible people who have supported at times where I haven't lifted the ball to where it should have been, and they've been able to say it's not quite there. You just need to go a little bit harder with that one, and then you go, oh, okay. Instead of people who don't necessarily give that support, where they just say, oh, you're trash, I'm not going to hire you again. Instead of seeing that passion there.
Yeah.
And since you've actually had, well, it would be almost a decade now of you having some sort of full-time employment in places. Do you feel like you've had a more malleable experience actually at the Haze and being able to shape the room? Did you have that at the other places, or?
Yeah. I've enjoyed being tied to a venue for that reason. Like, I enjoy the ability to sort of shape the venue into a space that I think it could be, or that experience has told me it's capable of being. I sort of, I found that I very much enjoy leaving my mark on a place like that. And like being employed full time like that has been really cool. You get to watch too, lots of different sound designers come in and interpret the place differently. You get this nice perspective of other people coming in and sort of showing you parts of the space that maybe you even didn't notice. You become very sort of one-track mind with it, and you sort of think, like, this is the best it can be, and then somebody comes along and designs a show, and you just go, wow, I didn't realize it could be developed like that. That's really cool. That's kind of why I stick with venues instead of being, say, a freelancer. It's kind of it's enjoyable to me to use the same space over and over again, but watch how it's uses and get to be involved in adapting like these really versatile theaters that we live in into its different forms for a different show or for a different style of whatever we're putting on. This is even at the Haze, as you said before, we've got cabarets and we've got musicals and live performances and all sorts of things in there. And I could even do something they call the neglected musical, and they are,
I love that.
Yeah, they're run as this. It's so chaotic, and I really dig it. It's got this really fun vibe to it. But basically, what happens is they will the organizers of this will get a bunch of people together, a bunch of actors, and be like, "Hey guys, this is a musical. It's kind of not very well known, but we're gonna just give you the script, and you're gonna like learn it. And you're gonna jive with it, and we're gonna learn it in a day or two, and then you're gonna put it on, and you can hold the script." This is for how chaotic this is, right? So
I love it.
The last one I watched, they were all holding their scripts. They were still reading it, but the challenge was to turn this musical into something and make it happen in a space that has no audio, just like a standard light wash on stage. It was just this pure like, let's see what you can do as actors. That's the kind of vibe I got with it, and it was the most sensational thing. And I didn't even have like much of a technical input in that. I just got to be in the venue as the technical operator to sort of experience that. It was such a wild experience. I had never seen this before in my decade of being an engineer. And I was like, wow, what a wild idea this is. I love that somebody has just thought, you know what, we can do this here, and let's just give it a go. Let's roll it and see what happens, And it's popular. Like, people seem to really enjoy that. And I'm like, yeah, that's where I get my fire for places like this. It's just to sort of watch all the different things that come about in these places and watch how they adapt the space. It's really cool.
Yeah, it was actually quite incredible. My favorite musical that has been put on there was Young Frankenstein. How this, essentially cavity of a stage, because it's quite large, was filled with an Escher type painting
Yeah.
a stage
Yes.
and set. Sorry, set. It was an Escher type set, completely green. Everything was green. It was incredible. And then the sound design that was carried on through that, like all the little door creaks, all the little eerie sounds that came with the comedy,
Yep.
the horror comedy. When you're actually working with another sound engineer, sound designer, because when we're in theater, you are one cog, which is the sound engineer and shaping the sound of the band and the vocals live.
Yep.
But then there's the sound designer. Can you just explain what your two roles actually are and how you work with them to create the full picture?
Sure. In a very clinical sense, so if you strip any of the sort of things out of it and you look at it solely as the theory of it all, a sound designer is quite literally that. They design the sound. So they're the ones that make the decisions about, this, I'm going to use this sound effect and the band's going to sound this way, and I'm going to mix and EQ the vocal mics that everybody's wearing a certain way, and maybe we want to put a microphone on stage somewhere, and maybe we want to, use QLab and do sound effects, or AV, or all sorts of things like that, right? A sound designer is the person that comes in and liaises with the director, and the director says, we want to make X happen. And the sound designer goes, okay, cool. We'll do this, this, and this, and that will give us the result that we need. Then it moves from the sound designer to at least at the Haze, because it's only a very small group of people. That will then move to me as the technical operator, and I will follow the instructions of the sound designer and set up the microphone, adjust the EQ, create I don't necessarily create the QLab, but I'll have a hand in assisting the setup of that, which QLab is the software that plays the sound effects. And we then work together to realize the vision of the director, and the sound designer is the person making the decisions as to how it goes and what happens, and the technical operator is the person sort of enacting those things. That's the sort of clinical way of looking at it. But because this is a smaller venue, and because we don't have endless amounts of staff and endless amounts of time and all of these sorts of things, those roles start to blend a little bit. And so I have sound design credentials. I don't fully use them to their greatest capacity here, but because of that, I will offer suggestions, and I will maybe occasionally I'll be delegated a job to do to make something happen. And that's sort of how that works. So Young Frankenstein's probably a great example of this.
Yes, and that was Nick Walker as the sound designer.
That's correct.
On that.
Yes. I dearly miss Nick. Actually, he's great fun to work with. I enjoy him. But that show was incredibly ambitious, and it was a bigger undertaking for everybody involved there. Not necessarily because it was a chaotic show or anything like that, but there was a lot involved in making that show work, and everybody was more than capable of doing it, but conditions such as being time poor, such as having grand ideas for designs and things like that, just meant that there was a lot to do. And as a result of that, Nick could not fully do everything solely by himself. It was not feasible for him. And so while Nick was working on certain parts of the show, I would take over. I would help him by being like, all right, well, you work on the AV, the projection, and the sound of the band or something like that. I will mix the vocal mics, and we'll make that, we'll make all that jam together, and we'll gel that in nicely. And another example would be the fact that the Hayes Theatre itself presents a unique challenge where the sound engineer doesn't get an incredibly good representation of the sound where they sit from, because they're right up the back of the room. They're very close to the roof. They have all of the audience sitting directly in front of them, and all of those sorts of things mean that you can't quite hear exactly what's being put out into the room. You've had, it's very nuanced when I talk like that. But it might be slightly quieter, or what you think sounds really good to you as the sound engineer might be destroying somebody's face out in front there because of how loud it is, or because of the way the vocals sound, or something like that, right? And so Nick then took on the role of helping communicate back to me some of the tweaks and changes that I needed to make in order to make sure that what was being delivered sounded good to everybody. And he was the one that was able to sort of walk around the space and have a listen to it whilst I was locked behind the desk. So he and I shared a lot of the roles, whereas maybe in a much bigger performance, something that might have been toured in or something like that, the sound designer solely designs the sound, and the operator only operates the audio and does nothing else. Like, that's all they do. They're there from whenever they start to whenever they finish, and they do their bits that they've been allocated, and that's it. Whereas the Hayes, and like in the regions where I was too, that's not really how it works, because we don't have the luxury of infinite amounts of people and infinite money and infinite all the things in order to make that sort of thing happen. Nor would it be feasible for that to be the case. And so, I share the role with a lot of other people in that regard.
That's actually quite a common, not a common, but I would say a more realistic mode of thought when we're talking about theatre, because when you think of it, there are more smaller theatres in the world than there are larger theatres.
Yeah.
There's only one opera house in Australia. Each city only has, obviously except for Broadway and West End and the other big capitals of theatre in the world, we are realistically always having to do multiple jobs.
Yeah.
This is something that touched on with Daniel Cottier, and even when he was working in the opera house, just needing to do those extra little jobs, because you will pick them up and say, I can do that, I can get that done.
Yeah.
Obviously, as long as it's not getting in the way of someone else's role and upsetting the flow of work that is required, because when we are in this field of work, we have our job and that's the job we do, because everybody has their allocated spot.
Yep.
But then your allocated spot grows larger as things get smaller, or tend to anyway.
Yeah, no, you've hit the nail on the head there. Definitely, your sphere of influence, let's say that, it gets bigger as the project becomes maybe smaller. Let's say. I don't like using the word small, because it's not small. It's just like, I don't know. It's
when there are less people to work on.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Yeah, because I don't want to diminish from the talent that comes through that place. Everybody involved, all the performers, all the designers, everybody else, they're world class, right? And actually, like the venue, the Hayes itself, presents a challenge for a lot of those people, and I think that's what makes a lot of these people so good at what they do, is that they can turn that space into something awesome. And again, I get to sit there as the person attached to the theatre, and watch that happen, and that's a real blessing. I really enjoy that. it's exciting. And I also think that learning the skill of being malleable and adaptable, and learning the skills of, taking on challenges as they come, and just jumping into stuff is more important than how well you can mix, or how good how like pristine a show you can do. I've always carried this opinion that theater is so much about the flaws in it and the limitations in it, because it's such a human thing. You're gathering all these people in a small space, and you want them to sing and dance and talk in a very choreographed and organized way, right? But we're still humans at the end of the day. And I think people really latch on to, what a great performance those people all did there. And then, while they might not notice errors and mistakes and things that get done, if they're so captivated and drawn by the show, I think that part of those errors and those mistakes and things like that is part of what makes the theater what it is. And there's this great sort of vibe about how human the whole thing is, instead of a movie where it could have all been edited out. This is happening in front of you. This is live,
yes,
warts and all. And so that's sort of what that's a little bit of the mantra that I carry into the performance that I do. Now, that's not to say that, I'm going to just do a sloppy job and, that whatever, that's fine. No, I don't believe that at all. I think you definitely need to do as good a job as you absolutely can. But you need to accept that mistakes can happen. Accept that,
yes,
sometimes it's not going to be this perfect thing that you had in your head, and occasionally things go wrong that are way out of your control, and you need to learn to roll with that. But then you also need to learn all these different things to make yourself really adaptable, really malleable, really pliant as part of the role. You sort of ease yourself in, you're nice and relaxed, and you can just take whatever comes, and actually learn to enjoy some of the flaws, and some of the things.
yes.
Some of the things
Have a good laugh about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know for so many shows that I've done, there hasn't been a perfect show. I've had really good runs where everything's just nailed and locked in. But maybe somebody else has had an off day, or somebody else missed a cue, or something else happened. And, it might have been minor, might have been major, but, it's part of it. And you can't take it back. You can't redo it. So you might as well enjoy it,
Yeah, it's on the thing of theatre being live. I've been recently, weirdly enough, been listening to and watching how the recent stunts into the Fast and the Furious have been real.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like the one I watched most recently was this scene where they drag a safe through the streets of Sao Paulo.
Ah, yes, I remember that one.
City in Brazil.
That was Furious 7, wasn't it?
I think so, yes. And I remember first watching that in the YouTube clip and thinking, oh, that's CG. They're like, no, it's real. Had to be explained it was real, and then went through all the shots, shot by shot, that it was real. And I thought, oh, wow, that's actually absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But then when we go into the theater, everything is real, even if we have backing tracks or we have hologram things that are now popping up, or we have...
Well, I'm waiting for a director to say, hey, can we drag a safe across the stage like that with a car? It's bound to happen.
It will be bound. I mean, there was Spider-Man musical, so anything's possible.
Of course.
But let's not talk about that. But, everything on stage has an element of real to it. Otherwise, if it's not, we're at the theater watching a movie.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Yep.
Or a recording, a visual recording of a theater show or a play.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And,
and who wants that? It's just, if you want to watch a movie, you go and watch a movie. But I don't go to the theater to watch a movie. I want to see an actor's interpretation of a character, and I want to listen to the beautiful music that comes out of it, and I want to see the direction, and I want to know that that's something that's happening directly in front of me, and anything that could go wrong has probably gone wrong before, or it's entirely plausible. It adds this other dimension to it that I think a lot of people already intrinsically know. Maybe not.
Yes.
Maybe not enough mainstream people know about it. But like when they go, when even like people who don't usually go and see musical theatre go to watch a show, they're like, "Wow, I've never experienced that sort of thing before. I really enjoyed that."
I think that was really highlighted in. We only had one stopped show in all. We had over 70 shows of Merrily We
Yes,
Roll
we
Along,
did.
and we had one stopped show. And I actually think it was incredible,
Yeah.
the stop show. It was fun
Yeah.
in a weird way. I mean, it was stressful, I'll tell you what.
Oh, for sure.
But when it happened, the stage manager said, look, we have to have a stop show. There's been a small technical error. We just need to stop for 10 minutes, I think it was. And everybody clapped when all the actors came back on.
Yep.
And it was this sense of, this is real.
Absolutely.
This is happening. These are people, and we're experiencing this as real as it gets.
Yeah.
There's no overdubs.
Yep.
There's that piano that's getting played by Andrew Kashan is real.
Yep.
People definitely knew it was real after that. And it was like, wow, this is a real show in front of me.
It is. And, I can only imagine there's some people in the crowd who probably sat down before the start of the show and went, oh, I wonder what's going to go wrong tonight. I wonder if, I'm sure
Most
there's a
definitely.
small bit of schadenfreude when they get that kind of thing. And they actually get a stop show. Like, that's something to talk about afterwards, They would have gone, oh, wow, how good this show was. Oh, the show stopped. Well, that was a bit exciting too, Something that other audiences didn't get to experience, Yeah, you're right. It's incredibly stressful to us. But, I don't know. It kind of just adds something to it, doesn't it? It's kind of why you do it.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, we would be in movies if we wanted, something that we could show to people after the fact and have it all recorded and edited and all that sort of stuff. But I think all of us are there because we love doing this stuff live. We love showing people a great time.
Yeah, we could just do a George and, edit out things from Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cut that.
20 years after it was released, 30 years after it was released.
Look, Han shot first.
I still want to make edits.
Han shot first.
But when you're in the theater and you're actually experiencing these problems, they are incredibly stressful, especially when, say, a mic doesn't work or something's not turning on or a feedback loop happens. How have you actually developed protocols or mantras or modes of thinking to deal with those things that do happen? It's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when it happens, especially something as devastating as, say, a feedback loop in the middle of a show.
It's not without... I don't think any amount of preparation will ever completely relieve the stress or completely remove the anxiety and completely avoid absolute disaster. There's too much complexity in it. And there's too many things, particularly in the audio world, that can go wrong. No matter how well you design a system, there is still the potential for a problem. There is still the risk. And, and unfortunately too, audio is probably the most stressful of those jobs, because if you miss a lighting cue, if you miss an AV cue, if you flub a line or something like that, I think for the most part, people don't immediately notice unless it's something enormous, right? Unless it's something that oh my God, this thing went wrong. But if the slightest thing, if I miss the first half of a word somewhere, people will notice that. You know, like if it's an audio problem, people instantly notice something is off. And there's no getting around that. So it's the hardest thing to get right, and it's also the first thing people notice when it goes wrong. And so I would not recommend audio engineering or musical theater to people who live a highly strung kind of life. You need to kind of have a bit of a kind of need to be a bit chill about this and be ready for disaster to strike. Unfortunately, you know, like that's just sort of how it goes. And but I guess for me, what I have done is, firstly, when I got to the theatre here at the Hayes, I made sure to familiarize myself with the system as in all its intricacies, in all of its flaws, and all of its weird and wonderful things. I've obviously inherited all the microphones and all the PA system and everything else from the previous people that set it all up. And particularly with something like Young Frank, where I came in like 3-ish, well, you know, like let's say 70% through the project, and had to pick it up really quickly. You know, I had to learn that system and just work out where its strengths were, where its weaknesses were, and how to sort of steer around that, or how do I tweak the system so that it works as reliably as it can. And unfortunately, there was a lot to deal with in that show, and I will put my hand on my heart and say there was a couple of showstops as a result of sound technical troubles for Young Frankenstein. And, you know, in the time they were stressful. And also I was irritated a little bit because I genuinely believed I had solved a lot of the problems, and then they came back again. And, you know, and you just kind of have to learn to live with that. And unfortunately too, you kind of have to also accept that some of these decisions have been made outside of your control. And you kind of have to learn to roll with that. I'm a bit of a YouTube. I enjoy listening to YouTube, right? And there's a YouTube channel called The Vlog Brothers. Hank Green and his brother, whose name escapes me, but anyway, Hank was asked this question, you know, how do you deal with being the owner of VidCon, this huge convention thing that happens every year? Well, he was the organizer of it. Yeah, he's yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
I didn't know that.
he is the spearhead of so many projects. He's got all those YouTube channels. He's got all the merchandising stuff. He does all this research. On top of that, he manages, like, he's got this huge, ridiculous TikTok presence, and he's got all this stuff, right? And he's in his mid-40s. Like, he's just so prolific with this stuff. So ultimately, the question came up, and somebody asked him, how do you deal with the stress of owning all of this stuff, and how do you deal with problems when they come up, and how do you manage this sort of stuff? And he had an excellent way of describing it to it, which was to learn to compartmentalize stuff that is within your control, and learn to be, you know, as on top of that as you feel like you're comfortable being. And then the biggest part to learn is that there is stuff beyond your control. There is stuff you can't predict, and there is stuff that you cannot, you could never plan for. And it's so important for you to, when in those moments, recognize that this is a thing that is beyond your control, and you can either let it sort of take over you and be like, oh God, this should never have happened. Why did this happen? Or you can be like, okay, a moment of breath. Like, let's just take a breath and let's just accept that this has happened. There is nothing we can do. We can't go back. So let's just fix the problem as it got there. And once we have, you know, put the show on or whatever, once the problem has been solved and you have an opportunity later on, you can go back and address it and hopefully get to a stage where you don't have that problem again. So The showstops that we had at Young Frankenstein were a result of microphones getting too much sweat in them, and they start to sound like they're going underwater, which is obviously not good because people are relying on hearing that in order to hear stuff, right? So you can very clearly hear that something went terribly wrong with their microphones, and I had to get the show stopped, run backstage, and replace the mics with spares. So the thing that's out of my control in that situation is I can't stop the actor from sweating, and I can't stop that sweat from going into the microphone. I could try a myriad of different things, but ultimately water will find its way in, right? And it will get into the microphone and it will make that microphone stop working. We had backup plans in mind. The first one was he was wearing a second microphone. This is our lead performer in this, Matt Backer. And I'm eternally grateful for his patience in this because it was stressful. But he was wearing a backup, right? And so when I first heard that the microphone was starting to sound like it was going underwater, okay, we instantly switch across to his backup microphone. And unfortunately, it just meant that unfortunately his backup microphone also fell over. And so then we go to backup plan B, which is we have spare microphones on standby sitting side of stage and ready to go onto an actor when that happens. Unfortunately, that does mean we have to stop the show because I have to run backstage and assist the assistant stage manager to get the microphone off him, get it out of the layers of props and clothing and all the costumes and things like that, and put this other one back on him, get him back out on stage and get it up and running. Those are my backup plans. So the first is let's try and do everything we can to avoid this happening in the first place. And since it did happen, we fall to our backup plans. And that's how I manage it, right? I recognize where things can go wrong, things that are within my control that I can fix. And I plan around those. I create backups. I make sure that there is contingencies in place, and I work on doing as much as I can to sort of, try and prevent those things from happening in the first place. And when that inevitably fails and when things go wrong, I have backup plans. And that helps me manage the stress, right? I think it's infinitely more stressful if all of that happened and then I was like, shit, I don't have any kind of backup. What am I supposed to do now? Does he go out on stage acoustically or what? What are we supposed to do? That's how I manage it. It's a case of ensuring that all of as much of what can be planned for is planned for, and then learning to accept, okay, sometimes things are out of my control, and to it's very much a self thing, because so many sound engineers are perfectionists. They don't want things to go wrong. It's almost ironic, really, that the show, the aspect of musical theater and live that is most likely to go wrong, audio, is full of perfectionists who cannot have anything go wrong. You know what I mean? There's so many of them, and they're all like, it can never go wrong. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, you've said something quite profound, and something that I've spoken about with other people as well in terms of live music and being a performer, not just live, but also when you record or when you're doing anything creative, is that, you have to just do it's like a trust fall. You're trust falling into your practice. The more you've practiced, the more you can fall.
For sure.
In a sense. Like if, you've had a decade of experience and you've encountered so many of these problems that I'm assuming would have a litany and files and files and files within your mind of, okay, when this happens, I immediately do this. when I'm miking up people who are in heavy amounts of costuming and makeup, there might be more sweat problems as if
Yeah.
there wasn't. And as you said before, we don't learn that when we're doing a degree. The degree helps us get all the fundamental baseline chops. It covers our the floor. It sets the floor, but our personality and what we bring sets the ceiling for what we can actually bring to a production or to a recording or to whatever we do creatively.
And to further that too, that's where I have started to focus a lot of my energy, right? I personally feel like I am confident enough in my talents and my ability to mix audio. And so the process of mixing audio for me is now starting to take a second seat, and the main priority that I'm now focusing on is the interpersonal relationships that I have with other people in that project, and making sure that those people are confident in my ability as I am confident in my ability, and learning to communicate with those people and work with those people and give them a lot of reassurance and confidence in what I do, and letting my talent as an audio engineer speak for itself by just being over there, right? And I can mix audio, and that's great, but I've realized later on that, people don't, directors and musical directors and, all the creative people and all the administrative people and a lot of other people around you don't care how you do your job, don't care how well, or, what kind of plugins you're using and what settings you're using on each channel on the mixer, right? They only care about, I want to hear this person and I need to hear the band and I need it to happen now. And, I don't want it to sound bad. And, I don't care how you do it, just make it happen, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so
Yep.
I now am, I feel confident in my ability to do that, to make something happen. Now I'm focusing on making sure that the people around me get to feel that confidence as well. And I think it's working. Like, and I'm hoping it's working, but I feel like getting the job at the Hayes was a great signifier to me that was working. That that not only was my talent speaking for itself, but my ability to convey to others that's something that I can do, and that they can trust me to say, hey, we need something done over here, that they can just go and do that. And, they don't freak out being like, oh, geez, I hope they actually get that done. Or because what I want is for people to feel comfortable around me, that, I can get stuff done, and that when things go wrong, everybody, I think, in the theater accepts that at some point something's going to go wrong. We spoke about this before. We can't get a perfect show, and people are going to have moments, and I'm going to have moments. And so my goal now is to help people feel confident in knowing that when that sort of thing happens, when things like that go wrong, they don't feel worried that it's not going to be resolved, and they're confident that what I can do will solve that problem for them, or will get us back up and running in no time.
Yeah, it's very similar in the drum sense of directors, musical directors, sound engineers don't necessarily care about the drums or the cymbals I'm using. Might show interest, in the things that I'm using.
Yeah,
but it's just,
exactly.
Can I have a cymbal swell here? There we go.
Yeah.
I need a tighter snare here. It needs to sound more marchy.
Yep.
Okay, I know what tool to use. that's the sound they're hearing. It's my responsibility to go, okay, I immediately know how to do that. It'll,
Yep.
it'll either be, yep, I'll get that next performance because, got to go home,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, and I think like so for me, it'll be a case of we can't hear X performer on stage because the band's too loud in this number, or you missed a line over here. We need to sort of focus on that a little bit, or things like that, or like maybe in a band sense too. This song is very heavy with the oboe, or has a guitar solo in it, or has a X and Y and Z, and I need to be. Maybe I missed that in my own mixing, and so the director can come up and be like, hey, we got this thing. And I could be like, yeah, sweet as, I'll sort that out and it'll be great, and it just kind of stops there. But like but the director feels like it gets resolved, and the people around me are sort of buoyed and confident in my ability. I don't need to show them I don't need to tell them how good I am. I can just show them by doing a good job, and then hopefully being a reasonable person in the process.
So, beyond all of this, what we've talked about, are there any tips or several fundamental things that you would say to people who are up and coming or emerging as audio engineers, or looking to get into the audio field, and trying to be able to do the best possible job they can? What are some fundamental things?
From my own experience, the most important thing that I would say is, particularly when you're starting out, is to keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate your life by reinventing the wheel. Just get things done, and you will develop your own method, your own way of doing things. And as you grow and as you improve as a sound engineer, and as you learn from other people, because that's a really valuable thing, is watching how other people do the job. You'll learn how to improve your own layouts and setups and mixing and all sorts of things with it. But it's very important to not get bogged down in all the different, like, you got to use this plugin, it's the best, or you've got to use this sound console or this microphone and stuff like that. I have mixed really great shows on terrible equipment, and I've mixed really bad shows on fabulous equipment. Like it's not about that, and it's not about how no one cares about how complicated you make something. They only care about the end result, and I think that's important to pay attention to. But also recognize that, like, as exciting as as that little world is, you've got to start with the fundamentals. Like when I started mixing audio, I was on an analog sound desk. There was no digital anything. There was no computer anything. It was literally like the microphone plugs into a cable, that cable runs the whole way back to the desk, and it goes in and it comes down the channel, and all the little knobs and dials exist, and then it goes back out on another cable to another spot. There's no screen or anything to deal with, right? Like, and there's no plugins or anything. You've kind of just got to make it work with what you've got, which was fantastic, right? But you must keep it simple. The other thing is, for me at least, in this industry, and I'm gonna bang the drum a little bit on this one, but consider going regional. There is so many opportunities out in the regions, way more than I think anybody gives it credit for. I mean, I have pretty much exclusively worked in the regions now, and I don't think Sydney is my forever home. I'm going to give it a whirlwind shot, right? But and I've really enjoyed it so far. But like, I feel like my heart is in the country, and I look forward to taking my expertise and stuff and bringing it into the regions where there's lots of people with interest in this sort of stuff, but no idea how to get to it. But it's there. It's there if you look. And it took a leap of faith. It took a leap of faith to apply for a job, to ask people if they might consider having me around, for me to get into it. And once I finally did, so many doors opened up, and I never felt like I needed to go to the city. Sometimes I could I for a little while was convinced I was never going to be in the city. I was quite happy being in the country, right? But then this opportunity came up, and obviously I jumped on this. I thought this was a wonderful thing, and I was quite happy to do it. Um, but don't rule it out. Living in the regions is not completely without its challenges if you've never lived in one before, but that's the spice of life, like I'm a country boy giving the city a shot, and I'm sure there's so many people in the cities that could give the country a go and find they really enjoy it. And, I hope more people do, because they're always crying out for more people. They could use more people. So I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to plug the regions.
Yes.
Go the regions. So yeah, and then like other things. Do some research in your own time. Practice at home.
So actually, that's a really good point. How would you go about practicing audio engineering at home? If you could just enlighten on that one and expand a little bit.
It's challenging, and I feel like it's when in terms of live, there's limited things in what you can do, but something that I did a little bit of while I was still getting the hang of it was to borrow some equipment from work and just kind of like play around with it at home in my own time. And I was lucky enough to have people who were happy enough to let me do that, and it actually opened an avenue of like, oh, I know I could get this equipment for you. Do you want me to mix your garage band, or do you want me to come in and do something in the backyard, or stuff like this? And it started this really kind of grassrootsy, homely thing, but I had complete control over what was being used and how I used it. I got a really great shot at like learning stuff like that. And another way of looking at it now too is that the bar, like the cost of entry for learning some of this stuff is actually quite low these days too. It was not that long ago that a sound console was tens of thousands of dollars and not worth anyone's time. But now you can buy one for, a couple $100 in some cases. And it's a fully featured sound desk, and
Absolutely.
you can muck around with it and play around with it and take it to places, and it will keep up with so many like high performance things. Obviously there'll be limitations, but you would be surprised at the quality of gear you can get these days for not a lot of money. And it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile in terms of giving that a shot. I never had that option as a younger guy, but like I know now, like if I could literally pop onto eBay and be like, oh, I need a sound desk and a couple of microphones and a PA system, and I could do that whole thing under say $5,000, and know it would be good enough to do whatever it is I wanted to do. So that's an avenue. Not to mention the myriad of like people putting stuff up on YouTube and online courses and free information out there and like ebooks and all sorts of things. Like I just kind of like ate that up. And then lastly, you can go to things like there's live sound expos. Maybe post-COVID there'll be a lot more of those. But like, there's expos and things in the cities you can go to. There's and they are a cool little melting pot of like-minded individuals who want to show off really cool equipment. You can put your hands on it and have a play around, but then also, make connections, make network connections with people. You miss what was that thing that Rick used to say? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Morty. That kind of thing. Like it's that. So give yourself a bit of a shot at it. Like it's that. I remember listening to Aaron Sindos on your thing saying very much the same thing. You just got to take that shot, and that's important.
Yeah.
Those are the things I would sort of say, and then the rest is filling in the gaps in your knowledge with education and any opportunities that crops up, and be aware that like particularly at the moment, in this COVID world that we lived in, a lot of people walked away from this industry because it just got too much for them. And, there's no knocks against them, but that leaves a big door open for new talent. If anybody wanted to sort of throw their hat in the ring now, more and more outfits are realizing that we don't have enough people to staff an event or to mix a show or to blah. So they'll take the risk in training somebody up to get them to that level. So jump on it strike while the iron's hot.
Yes.
Yeah. That's my tips, I reckon.
Throughout these podcasts, there's definitely been a consistent theme: how we problem solve, how we network, but then also how we put our soul into the job and the job gives it back.
And I want to point out in that too, like just to sort of add my little bit to that, is that in none of these discussions has there been any technical discussion. We don't talk about I still haven't mentioned the sound console we use at the theatre. It doesn't matter. It's not important.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's all about those relationships you build with people. It's all about the experiences you get to have as a sound engineer and as you as a musician and as all the previous people who've been actors and directors and all those sorts of things. It's not about the gear and it's not about the stuff you use. It's about the shows you get to put on, and it's about the people you get to work with, and it's about making you as an individual somebody who's employable and adaptable and great to work with and really engaging to work with, and all that sort of stuff.
You know what, Josh? It has been incredible working with you on Merrily for the
thanks,
past
man.
7 months.
Yeah.
And also with young Frank, because
of course,
we worked together a little bit there.
As an orchestrator. No, it's been a wild ride, man, and like I've really enjoyed it too. I can't believe how quickly we've all gelled and banded together like that too. It's been really cool. And
yes,
from little country boy to big city slicker, I'm now one. I'm now it. I'm in there.
You're in the inn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that just goes to show how welcoming the Haze can be.
Oh, for sure.
And,
absolutely.
Especially to people who do put in, 110% effort and really want to make sure the production or the show, the connections and the networks and the friendships that are made are all really solid. All of the issues that arise are quickly deflated or talked about, and everybody feels like they're on equal footing.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, and I'm ever so grateful to the Haze for doing that for us. And I look forward to whatever lies ahead in my future and whatever venues I end up. I look forward to continuing to carry that torch. We're not a big industry. We're a very tight knit industry, and I kind of love that. I hope more people get into it. Of course, particularly people with deep pockets. but until that happens, let's just keep making it this kick-ass place to be.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Josh, for being on this podcast. I've been wanting to have you on for a little while now.
It's my pleasure.
Where can people follow you, see your stuff, etc.?
At the moment, come join me at the Haze for Lizzie we've got coming up. But we've got a full roster of shows coming up at the Haze Theatre. I don't do social media very much. There's who's going to be looking at a million photos of a sound desk at the back of a auditorium?
Well, believe you me, a lot of people.
Yeah, well, maybe I should get back into it again. Come say hi. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I'm happy to share my knowledge and show you a bit of what we do at the theatre. You'll catch me in the middle of a show, so I'll be in work mode. But I'd love to have a bit of a chin wag with some people, see what they think.
Lovely. Well, this has been Cypress Asking People Things with Josh Giuliano. I've definitely learned a lot this evening, and I hope everybody else who has been listening has learned a thing or two. definitely incredibly enlightening. So thank you again.
It's my pleasure, man. Glad to have it. Glad to be a part of this. It's good fun.
And enjoy whenever you're listening to this, morning, noon, or night.
See ya.